All right, now that we've done our exploration of SQL, we've defined some terms. Let's go ahead and actually do some real SQL. We're actually going to execute and write our own SQL commands. So we're going to go to this week's exercise. Go to the student view, so it looks like just like you guys would see the page. And then go ahead and go to the home page, and then week 11, fiddling with SQL. Step 1, you're going to navigate to this link, and you're going to replace the existing code. So step 2, replace the existing code with the code below. So copy everything all the way from these two little dashes. Make sure not to leave those out. All the way to the end here. You can do Control C or Command C if you're on Mac. Let's go to this link. Then do Control A or Command A if you're on Mac. And then do Control V or Command V if you're on Mac. Why did I use the keyboard and not, my right click? Because you're not going to be able to right click on this editor because it has its own menu. So you won't be able to see the copy paste. So make sure you do use the keyboard commands. It's good to start practicing those, right? It's a lot slower using the right click. All right, so what is your task? You have to modify the code. Oh, first we have to execute the code. So let's go ahead and execute. So I want you to do two executions of the code. First, just as it is. And notice it gives us Fiona Taylor with customer ID of 8. That's actually line 22 is giving us these results. So this is how we print out this results table. It depends on what we write for that command on line 22. Now, I want you to take off everything after the where. You should leave the semicolon. You don't have to. And then hit execute again. And notice this will give you the entire table. So it's up to you to figure out how do these commands relate to this table. What are these commands doing to generate this table? I can already tell you that lines 1 through 7, all they do is set up the table. They make an empty table. So make sure not to mess with those. In fact, you shouldn't change any of the commands before line 21. You shouldn't change any of the commands before line 7. So don't change these. And then you're going to want to create a new command in line 20. So here you're going to add another, we'll give you a clue. It's going to be an insert command. So that's going to be, you have to modify the code to add your own name and email to the record. So make sure that your command looks exactly like the others. And I totally invite you to see, hey, how is this command creating this record, right? See the format, see the order of things, see the syntax, see the rules. This is what I do on a daily basis. I look at code, I learn the rules, and then I write my own version of that code. You're going to do the same thing for this exercise. Now, last thing you're going to do is you're going to modify that last query at the end so that it only gets the record that you made. So after you write your code on line 20, you're going to change this code on line 22. Now, it's going to look a lot like this one, the Fiona Taylor example one. But instead of grabbing Fiona Taylor, right, it should grab you. Of course, you have to add yourself to the table before. Now, notice all this code is being run every time you hit execute. So if you make a change to the code, make sure to hit execute to test out your code. All right, so that's it for that exercise. Let's go ahead and continue. All right, so SQL. It's essential for creating and managing tables, just as you'll see in the exercise. It is very widely used, very popular, and you're going to use it with database management systems that are relational. Remember, if it uses SQL, it's relational. It's MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, all examples of software that work with SQL. You can also use high-level programming languages like we covered last week. So Python, JavaScript, Java, a really powerful one for databases. You can actually use those to communicate with a database. So you don't have to use SQL. A big term here is going to be relational database. So if it's using a table, we call it a relational database. And if it's using a table, it's going to definitely be using SQL, because SQL is the language of database tables, of relational databases. So if you see rows and columns in that database, it's going to be relational. So this is relational databases are best for data that has strict consistency requirements. What does that mean? If you need your data to look exactly one way, you know exactly what your customers are going to look like, you know exactly what your products table is going to look like, you go with SQL. Now, if your data is kind of changing shape, if it has different models, from one week to another, if it's more complicated, there are solutions. There are non-relational databases, often called NoSQL databases. So these store data not in tables. They use different formats. Could use documents, graphs, essentially anything that doesn't have a fixed schema. Schema is another word for model. Model is just the shape of your data. So if your table, for example, has customer ID, name, email, that's the model of your customer data. So yeah, schema, just another name for model. Model is just what does the data look like? What rules, what shape is it following? So data can be stored in all sorts of formats. It doesn't use tables, columns, or keys. Some software that is non-relational, some popular software that's non-relational is MongoDB, Cassandra, and Redis. So it's essentially data, like I said, that might be changing constantly, right? This is where you might use NoSQL. And then let's go ahead and cover this week's lab. So this week, you'll be creating your own database table, but in spreadsheet software. So definitely check that one out. I won't be making a video on it. It's pretty straightforward. Make sure you know your vocab, records, columns, fields, and then of course design the table to match your business idea. A little bit of a clue, your first column should be the ID column. Remember, if you're working with a SQL database, you got to give the database a way to distinguish everybody, a unique identifier. So make sure your first column on your table is the ID column. But yeah, go ahead and check out the assignment instructions and give it a shot. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.